There is a graveyard in Kenya that no human built. No stones were placed, no names were carved, no ceremony was planned. But elephants keep coming back to it. They have been coming back for decades, and nobody told them to. Most people assume animals don't think about death.
That when an animal dies, the others simply move on, find a new member, adjust the group, continue. That's not what elephants do. Elephants remember. Not the way you remember a face or a name. Deeper than that. They remember with their feet, their trunks, their entire bodies. And the memory pulls them back, sometimes years later, to the exact place where someone they knew took their last breath. The first researcher to document this seriously was Cynthia Moss. She had been studying elephants in Amboseli, Kenya since 1972. Over decades of observation, she noticed something that had no easy explanation. When elephants encountered the bones of another elephant, any elephant, not just their own family, they stopped. They didn't run, they didn't ignore it, they approached slowly. They touched the bones with their trunks. They rolled the skulls gently across the ground. They stood in silence for minutes at a time. Then they walked away. But here is where it gets stranger. When Moss presented elephants with 3 objects, a piece of ivory, a piece of wood, and an elephant's skull, the elephants showed almost no interest in the wood. Some interest in the ivory. But the skull? They were drawn to the skull immediately. Every time. Multiple elephants, multiple trials. Something in the skull communicated something to them that the other objects did not. Scientists still don't fully agree on what that something is. In 1986, Moss observed something that stopped her research notes mid-sentence. An elephant named Echo, the matriarch of one of the most studied herds in Africa, lost her calf. The calf died near a dry riverbed. Echo stayed with the body for 2 days. She tried to lift it with her tusks. She covered it with dirt and branches. She stood over it through the night. When the rest of the herd finally moved on, Echo was the last to leave. She looked back 3 times before disappearing into the bush. What Cynthia Moss documented was not an isolated incident. Joyce Poole, another researcher working in Amboseli, recorded over 50 separate instances of elephants engaging with the remains of deceased elephants over a 30-year period. The behavior was consistent. Touching, turning, standing, silence. But what Poole noticed, and what made her stop and reread her own notes, was this. Elephants showed this behavior specifically toward elephant remains. Not lion remains, not buffalo remains, not human remains. Elephant bones. They knew the difference. Karen McComb at the University of Sussex decided to test exactly how precise that recognition was. In 2006, she presented wild elephants with the skulls of elephants, rhinos, and buffalo, all roughly the same size. The elephants spent significantly more time investigating the elephant skulls. Then she went further. She presented elephants with the skull of their own deceased matriarch alongside the skulls of other elephants they didn't know. The family members spent the most time with their own matriarch's skull. They touched it more. They stayed longer. Adult females, adult males, juveniles who had been born after the matriarch died and had never met her. They all responded the same way. To a skull of someone they had never seen alive. That finding sits in a strange place scientifically because it suggests the recognition isn't purely visual memory. It isn't, I remember that face. It is something else, something transmitted through the herd before the young elephant was even born. A form of cultural memory, encoded not in language, but in behavior. The older elephant's response to the skull shaped the younger elephant's response. Generation after generation, a knowledge of the dead passed down to those who never knew them. There is one more thing. In 2016, researchers from the University of Colorado published a study in the journal Royal Society Open Science. They had documented a case of a wild elephant herd returning to the body of their matriarch over an 11-day period after her death.
Different family members came at different times. Some came alone. The deceased elephant's daughter visited every single day for the full 11 days. She touched her mother's face with her trunk each time. On the final day, she stood motionless beside the body for over an hour. Then she left and didn't come back.
We have a word for what that looks like, but we are careful about using it when talking about animals. The word is grief. Scientists prefer phrases like bereavement behavior or death awareness because grief implies something internal, something felt, something we cannot measure. But here is what we can measure. Elephants return to the bones of their dead. They recognize individuals they never met. They stand in silence over remains for hours. They leave and come back, sometimes years later, to the same bones, in the same place.
We tend to think of death awareness as something uniquely human, one of the things that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. The knowledge that we will die, the rituals we build around that knowledge. But the elephant data suggests something uncomfortable. That awareness of death, real awareness, not just instinct, may not be uniquely human at all. It may be something that evolved quietly in large-brained social animals long before we arrived. And the elephants have been practicing it in a dry riverbed in Kenya for longer than we have had words for what they're doing.
There is a graveyard in Kenya that no human built. The elephants keep coming back, and now you know why.